Hello again, friends, Earpers, and Twitter deputies. My name is Ghostbot. Let's talk about those purgatory case files. First of all, let's just address that giant elephant in the room. Ghostbot, you might be saying to yourselves, why are you wearing your sunglasses to record a video? Well, obviously, the answer is that I'm trying to channel some tropical vibes in my fashion in order to counteract the chill of this eerie investigation. The real answer is that my doctor did some freaky shit to my eyeballs the other day, and I kind of look like some kind of rage virus-induced zombie. So to spare you all the horrific sight of my zombie eyeballs, I'm wearing my shades. With that out of the way, let's do some theorizing. As always, this is not a recap video, this is not an overview video, this is not an attempt to give you a comprehensive understanding of the case files up until this point. If you are looking for a full recap or overview of everything that we know so far, then I will point you to the Twitter conversations that have been going on in the replies to the Purgatory Case Files account posts. I will also point you to the hashtags Purgatory Case Files and Wormhole Whisperers. There are also a couple other places where you can carry on the discussion if you would like to. So if you're looking for recaps and overviews, I will point you in those directions, and those links will be down in the description of this video, so check those out if that's what you're looking for. But that is not what I'm here to do. I am here to talk to you about some theories that I have based on the evidence that's been given to us so far. I make these videos in order to open up a discussion and a conversation, and so never hesitate to comment down here on YouTube or tweet me and tell me why I am or am not completely right or completely wrong. Okay, so on to today's theory. So, a post on Josh Miller's Tumblr page shows us the letter that his grandmother, Lydia Laurent, gave to him in the package that also contained her key card to the hospital and the key to her old house. She instructs him to go into these places and get the things necessary in order to bring her and Schrank back from the dead. She speaks about a being called Baron Samedi, which is a figure in Haitian lore and voodoo. She explains that the Baron was the being that Schrank was making the deal with when he was told to assassinate the president. Because he didn't successfully assassinate Roosevelt, the Baron reneged on the deal. Laurent in this letter is instructing Miller to finish what his grandfather started, to bring the Baron back, and then use the Baron to bring Laurent and Schrank, and presumably Schrank's entire family that he lost, back as per the original deal. Now, obviously, death is playing a very large role in all of these things. We're dealing with resurrection of the dead, we're dealing with people grieving over the dead, we're dealing with the potential of supernatural forces playing a part in people's deaths. It's all surrounding death, and so that makes sense that a being like Baron Samedi would be involved in all of this. So where does Baron Samedi come in, if not at the moment of Schrank's assassination of Roosevelt? Where could he fit into the narrative before this point? Now, my original theory from last week was not only that Roosevelt had dabbled in the occult, but also that he had dealt with the very same supernatural being that Schrank had. I had supposed that perhaps it was when Roosevelt's mother and wife died that perhaps Roosevelt had contacted whatever the being was, which we now know to be Baron Samedi, and had in fact been the person who was responsible for bringing him in the first place. But now, knowing that Baron Samedi is the being that we're dealing with, we know that he's existed for longer than that. We know that he's specifically connected to Haitian lore, and from what I understand, Roosevelt does not have any connection to Haitian lore or voodoo. So to suggest that Roosevelt is responsible for the bringing of this Haitian being into the world seems, if nothing else, culturally appropriative. But we also find out in one of Roosevelt's letters to Wyatt that he actually thinks that he is responsible for his wife's and mother's deaths because he has already been dabbling in the occult before they die. So that kind of shoots a hole in my theory that it was his attempt to resurrect his family members that brought the demon to Earth in the first place. So let's go even further back. Where could this dabbling in the occult have begun for Roosevelt, if not when his wife and mother died on the same day? Teddy Roosevelt was considered to be a pretty fit fella. The interesting thing about this, and I've been just drooling for a way to pull this into the investigation, Theodore Roosevelt was extremely physically adept, but that was all in spite of a laundry list of illnesses and chronic disorders that he had as a child. He had asthma, and at that point in time in the 19th century, that could be fatal. They didn't have inhalers at that time, so having simply asthma could have been a death sentence for your child. He also had a number of other physical ailments that the historical record is not particularly clear on, but we know that he was not a very physically fit child. His father built a gymnasium for all of the children to use, but specifically for Theodore, in order that he could make his own body. And that's a direct quote from Roosevelt's father. He said that he had the mind. He was very smart, very sharp, but he wasn't healthy. We know that he became an adept boxer, he was a rancher, he went hunting, he went fishing, he went hiking. He actually went above and beyond what even the average human could do. Roosevelt was close with his father. He felt as though his father was the reason that he was able to be the capable young man and young adult that he was able to become. Roosevelt's father falls ill from stomach cancer while Roosevelt is in his second year at Harvard. He rushes to catch a train back to New York from Boston in order to see his father before he dies, and he misses him by hours. When he gets back to New York, his father's already gone. His father also kept his illness from him because he didn't want to worry him. He didn't want him to start to fear mortality. Now, we also know that Roosevelt, in reality, was hit very hard by the death of his wife. He writes in his journal from that day, "The light has gone out of my life." So we know that this is a man who is very, very strongly affected by the loss of the people that he loves. To lose his father and not get to see him before he died, and not even know that he was ill until he knew that he was dying, that must have been really painful for him. Perhaps his father's attempt to keep him from fearing mortality by keeping from Theodore his own illness actually totally backfired and had the result of making Theodore even more terrified of mortality than he already was. Maybe realizing that his father, the man that he looked up to, the man who he saw as being the pinnacle of manhood, was mortal and could die, motivated him to try to avoid that for himself. Maybe Roosevelt started to look into the occult as a way to avoid death. In addition to being sort of the overlord of death, the one who makes sure that people don't come back from the dead as mindless zombies, that people pass into the other world once they've died the way that they are supposed to, the being that you call upon if you want to stop the coming of death. Baron Samedi is also known for his ability to cure illness in the same way that he staves off death if he feels it to be necessary. So, knowing what we know about Roosevelt's childhood, being very ill, having what at that time was a potentially fatal condition, his father pushing him to make himself despite his physical ailments, and then Theodore losing his father to a physical ailment that he did not even know he had until after he was dying, and then missing him by mere hours when trying to go see him before his death, may have had a profound effect on the way that Theodore felt about mortality and illness. Subsequently, my thought is, perhaps Roosevelt contacted Baron Samedi, or maybe some other being, but we'll go with the Baron because we know he's definitely a part of this, in order to possibly prevent it from happening to himself. Perhaps the reason that Roosevelt feels that he was responsible for his wife's and mother's death was because his original dabbling in the occult was entirely self-serving. Perhaps he sees their deaths as perhaps the consequence of his own attempts to elongate his own life. A life for a life, right? What better consequence for somebody in a moment of egotistical existential crisis calls upon a supernatural being in order to stave off his own illnesses and his own mortality than to have the people in his life that he loves and has left die within hours of one another in his own home? So that is my theory for right now. I think the reason that I'm really stuck on what Roosevelt's role is in all of this is because of how narratively juicy it is to take the story of the US president that we consider to be the pinnacle of manliness. He is a model of masculinity. He's physically strong, and physically strong in spite of all of the ways in which he could have been physically weak. He's emotionally stable. He's a rock. He rides into battle on the back of his horse with no fear whatsoever. He builds his own cavalry in order to fight in the war. He is the no-nonsense, take the bull by the horns kind of guy that every American man should try to be. And I love that there's the potential for this backstory about him where he's not any of those things at all. He's scared. He's panicking. In response to realizing that he's mortal, he doesn't just suck it up and pull himself up by his bootstraps. He turns to the supernatural. He tries to make a deal with a supernatural being in order to make sure that he doesn't die before he feels like he's supposed to. We get to see him grieve, we get to see him at a loss, we get to see him emotionally soft, and we also get to see him make huge mistakes as a result of that very kind of virility that is so often valorized when we talk about him. There's very little basis for any of this in the evidence that we've gotten. I'm thinking about all of this from a narrative standpoint. I could be completely off the mark and have no idea what I'm talking about, but narratively for a story, I think that's super fascinating. Well, friends, that does it for me today. Thank you so much for watching this video and going on this journey with me. Again, I apologize for the shades, but believe me, I would be apologizing even more if I wasn't wearing them. Let me know what you think about this theory. Let me know what you think about all the evidence that we've gotten so far. Remember, in the description of the video, I'm putting links to all of the places online where you can have these conversations with real people in real time. I hope to see you all in the subreddit and on Twitter. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I'm GhostBot. Have a wonderful rest of your day.